Apologies, my sound was off. Hello, welcome to Scholars Hub at Home. I am Carrie Williams, Director of Advancement Events, and welcome to Black History Month. And thank you for joining us for today's lecture titled Reckonings and Reimaginings, Thinking with Black Studies in, in the Humanities with Dr. Andrea Davis, Humanities Professor and Academic Convener of the 2023 Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences. I accept the responsibility to acknowledge the land I am on. Because we're not all gathered in the same space, the land I'm about to acknowledge might not be for the territory that you are on. Please take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on. The website native-land.ca is a good resource for this. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of the institution. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and this territory is subject to, of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement to peaceably care and share for the Great Lakes region. We are really pleased that this Scholars Hub is honoring Black History Month and is being put on in collaboration with the York University Black Alumni Network, affectionately known as UBAN. UBAN was created by Black York alum to celebrate the legacy, contributions, and accomplishments of Black alumni and students while engaging in the community through relevant programming that promotes Black excellence. To learn more about UBAN and our exciting programs, visit the Alumni and Friends website, and that chat should appear that link should appear in your chat shortly. Before we introduce our speaker, we'd just like to conduct a quick poll at the beginning of each session. Today's question is, how would you rate your knowledge regarding the topic of today's presentation? So that poll should come up on your screen shortly, and I will watch for responses. It's always helpful, I think, for our speakers to have a sense of who's in the audience and what knowledge they bring. Okay, so it's actually evenly split between somewhat informed and minimal knowledge. So thank you very much for sharing that, and I think that's very helpful to know. If you need help with the Zoom webinar at any point, please feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and enter your question. Our team is ready to help you. That same button may be used to submit questions after the lecture to answer during the Q&A period following today's presentation. Please note that all of your questions and comments are visible to our panelists and staff working behind the scenes, so we ask that you always keep your comments relevant and respectful. I'd now like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Andrea Davis. Dr. Davis is Professor of Black Cultures of the Americas in the Department of Humanities at York University, and academic convener of the upcoming, very exciting 2023 Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences taking place here at York. A former Canadian Commonwealth scholar, Davis earned a BA in English and Spanish Literatures, first-class honors, from the University of the West Indies, and an MA and PhD degrees in English at York University. We are beyond pleased that Dr. Davis could make time to join us today. Welcome. Dr. Davis, you may turn on your camera.
Thank you so much, Carrie,
and
Marjan, and other organizers of this event, and to those of you who have taken time generously out of your day to join me for this talk. I am going to share my screen. My talk, as you know, is Reckonings and Reimaginings, Thinking with Black Studies in the Humanities. In spring 2023, from May 27 to June 2nd, York University will be the proud host of the Congress for the Humanities and Social Sciences, the largest academic gathering in Canada and one of the largest in the world. Bringing national and international scholars and academics together across diverse disciplines and scholarly associations focused on the study of history, literature, politics, education, sociology, gender and sexuality studies, film studies, and much more. Congress is a critical annual venue for sharing ideas and thinking together about the most critical issues of our time. As a first in-person Congress since 2019, an outcome of the global COVID pandemic, Congress 2023 will provide an opportunity for reconnection, dialogue, and community. The theme Reckonings and Reimaginings ask us to consider the deep significance of the crossroads in which we now stand. As we emerge out of the pandemic, as the 2020 murder of George Floyd morphs into the 2023 murder of Tyre Nichols, as the deaths of more and more Indigenous children in residential schools are confirmed, we cannot simply pretend that our world has not been shaken, if not altered in some fundamental way by the events of the last 3 years. The climate catastrophe compounds this sense of urgency as we contemplate not only what the past has given us, but also the urgent need for action to ensure a just and sustainable future. What decisions must we make now to ensure we can live well together, as York's University Academic Plan asks us to do? Universities, their students and graduates, academics, writers, and thinkers have a responsibility to attend to these lessons, to decipher what they have taught us, and to offer our societies a language, a grammar for thinking through and beyond the crisis of our times. We cannot rely on politicians to do this work when partisan politics and self-interest increasingly shape political decisions, making real action for change impossible. Knowledge holds enormous power, and universities, as gatekeepers of knowledge, research, and innovation, have to decide what knowledge they will privilege and to what ends that knowledge will be used. In conservative states in the United States, the rush to censor critical race theory is one indication that politicians understand the power of knowledge and the potentially radical and transformative power of universities. The truth is that students have always been bolder and more forward-thinking than the universities that educate them. Students at San Francisco State College, led by the Black Student Union, went on a 5-month strike from November 1968 to March 1969 to demand the establishment of Black Studies and Ethnic Studies programs, the same kinds of programs that are now under attack. In January 1969, while this strike was still unfolding, 400 students occupied the computer lab at Sir George Williams University in Montreal, now Concordia, in protest of anti-Black racism. In 1976, thousands of South African students marched to denounce the imposition of Afrikaans as a language of instruction in elementary and high schools. And in 1989, students took to Tiananmen Square in Beijing to call for greater accountability, constitutional due process, and democracy. These protests were outlawed, and not all achieved their goals, but they were critical for consciousness raising on a global level. Concordia University finally apologized for its mishandling of the 1969 Black student protests in 2022. If, as York University says, we are going to write the future, it is now time for universities to be bold. Universities do not exist in a privileged vacuum. They are deeply informed by the historical, sociocultural, and political contexts that frame their existence. York's main Keele campus, for example, is located adjacent to Jane and Finch, one of Toronto's most culturally and racially diverse neighborhoods. York's core values of excellence, sustainability, and social justice must be informed by these sociocultural contexts. The reality is that Canadian educational institutions have been implicated in the violent histories of colonization and chattel slavery, and the disciplines of the humanities and social sciences have helped to entrench racist assumptions of Black and Indigenous peoples in humanity. Universities and their various disciplines, therefore, have much to learn and unlearn. If we're going to contribute to shifting public attitudes and perceptions toward a more just world, we must produce the kind of knowledge that values community-based research, recognizes and honors difference, and is grounded in relational justice. In Congress 2023, we are encouraging this kind of bold, transformative work. In the theme Reckonings and Reimaginings, we invite the Congress community to pause and reflect on the lessons we have learned, but also to begin the work of imagining and enacting the terms under which we might create a radically different world. What might it mean for us to commit to knowing and caring for each other across our differences, understanding that the world we want to live in tomorrow is dependent on the action we take together today? Can we reimagine a new set of social relationships grounded in decoloniality, anti-racism, justice, and preservation of the earth? And what might we produce when we reckon with and reimagine climate mitigation strategies and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals through the lens of racial justice and Indigenous resurgence? As a scholar who works and thinks through the humanities, I am particularly interested in what happens when we open up and engage a specifically interdisciplinary humanities dialogue about Black people's histories, cultures, and experiences. Centering an attention to Black lives within the humanities, I have argued in my work, challenges scholarly discourses about Black people's experiences that see Blackness as largely a problem to be solved. In these discourses, research on and about Black peoples see them and their communities as originating from a place of deficit. The concerns that drive this kind of research have to do with how we might bring Black communities into meaningful economic and educational participation in capitalist states, how we might contextualize Black poverty and historicize Black people's presumed criminality. In other words, how might we, as white academics or members of the Black thinking class, help Black people, as descendants of formerly enslaved Africans, immigrants, and refugees, overcome their ongoing marginalization, maladaptation, and victimhood? When Black people are invited into the academy as scholars and teachers, therefore, we're most often positioned within intellectual conversations meant to help white societies feel more comfortable about the problem of Blackness. We're expected to prove our scholarly utility by developing the intellectual discourse, providing the data in response to ideas about racialized crime, Black children's disengagement from the educational system, etc., to minimize the fare of Black discontent, even as we are offered up as part of the statistical evidence that Black people can indeed make it under the terms of competitive capitalist citizenship. For those of us who work in the humanities, the vanguard of sacred Western philosophical thought and ideas, the unasked question we have to teach, think, and write against is what can Black thought, ideas, literatures, and cultures, and not something understood narrowly as Black experiences, teach white societies in Canada, the United States, and elsewhere. But what if rather than a focus on Black abjection, we centered Black ideas, thought, and cultures within and across the disciplines of the humanities? In this way, we might begin to understand, for example, that Black Canadian literature has work to do in the world because of the unfinished project of freedom, and that we must approach its study as critical to the very preservation of Black life. Rather than demarcating Black abjection, Black Canadian literature is interested in how one reasserts agency, freedom, and humanity. In the face of what Rinaldo Walcott calls Black diasporic catastrophe, and M. Norbesi Philip names Mafa from the Kiswahili word for terrible occurrence or great disaster, Black Canadian literature must continually interrogate the deep ruptures caused by colonialism, even in the absence of a language that can articulate the depths of such a catastrophe. Black people, Norbesi Phillips says, cannot try as we might cauterize the wound of colonialism. It suppurates, bleeds sometimes, extrudes pus, sometimes appears healed, but aches always. As I've demonstrated previously, university students, the primary drivers of social and educational transformation, have been telling us since the 1960s that Black studies as a recognition of Black thought and imagination matters. With this understanding, in 2016 at York University, undergraduate and graduate students demanded meetings with their deans, the university president, and the provost, and called for a more diverse curriculum that reflected the interest of an increasingly diverse student body, as well as the hiring of more Black faculty. These demands and the emotional labor of students brought a group of Black faculty members, their co-resistors, and the dean together to discuss how they might respond to the needs of the students. Out of these conversations, we began the curricular process that would lead to the development of a Black Canadian Studies certificate in the Department of Humanities in September 2018. Deliberately situated in the humanities and arts rather than the social sciences, the certificate seeks to center the thoughts, ideas, theories, histories, and expressive cultures of Black peoples in Canada, to center Black knowledges as valuable in and of themselves, and not merely as a tool toward anti-racism or anti-bias training. As a pan-university certificate with courses drawn from the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies and the School of the Arts, Media, Performance, and Design, it combines compulsory courses in the departments of Humanities and History with elective courses in English, Writing, and the Department of Music. It also allows students to take a placement course in their fourth year, where they have been placed with TDSB trustees, MPPs, museums, and community organizations, and have been able to leverage their understanding of Black cultures in Canada into graduate studies and careers in the public or not-for-profit sectors. Since the certificate is open to students across the university who complete it alongside their majors, We have students not only from liberal arts and professional studies and arts, media, performance, and design, but also from health and science. With a direct entry option, we're also able to attract professionals looking for upskilling opportunities in an increasingly diverse labor force. The popularity of the certificate underscores the importance of this kind of work in universities. As universities, we must provide spaces for studying and theorizing the intersections of race, class, gender, sexuality, and geographical location, and how these intersect with power and affect the lives of marginalized peoples everywhere. But Black Studies programs need to include the study of history, literature, expressive cultures, and philosophical thought, not just criminology, sociology, or social work. Ideally, they would be truly interdisciplinary, transforming the professional fields, the sciences, engineering, and health so they can be responsive to Black people's wide-ranging ideas and contributions. If we understand that Black and Indigenous studies programs are indeed always already oppositional, created out of tension, protest, and activism, then we must also accept that they're not just about participating in knowledge production. They are about transforming the core character of the university and the societies in which we live. Finally, it is with this understanding of the power of Black and Indigenous people's voice, art, and imagination that I invite you to participate in Congress 2023 as we begin the hard work of shifting the goals of knowledge production toward a more just world. In 2023, we've chosen strategically to center the voices, experiences, histories, cultures of Indigenous and Black peoples, and to sit with those knowledges and be guided by those knowledges as we imagine new pathways forward towards a better future. We're also taking the opportunity to invite into the university, into these conversations, local community members, community artists, activists, high school students, high school teachers, parents, families, our own staff at York, alumni, retirees, and friends. There are a number of ways you can participate. Registration for Congress is now open. Researchers can register and present their research with one or more of the 6 to 7 scholarly associations that will be joining us in the spring. For alumni who are not affiliated or staff who are not affiliated, students even with a scholarly association, you can still participate in Congress. York is presenting a rich suite of 163 open programs, including art exhibitions, a performance showcase, Indigenous walking tours, interdisciplinary panels, and keynotes that will be available to our community members. Students, staff, faculty, alumni, and retirees, as well as members of the public, with the purchase of a community pass. And these events include the Big Thinking lectures. Yesterday or on Monday, the Federation announced and confirmed the first of our speakers in this series, the Right Honorable Michelle Jean, who will be thinking about reimagining Black futures through the lens of Haiti. Community passes are $55 for the entire week, but in recognition of the harm and violence done specifically, historically, and through the educational system to Indigenous and Black peoples in Canada, the community pass, the cost of the community pass this year will be waived for registrants who self-identify as Indigenous or Black. This registration will open on April 1st. All members of our York community may also participate in Congress as a volunteer. We're looking for 500 volunteers to support Congress operations and hiring over 100 student staff to work alongside the Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences. Ultimately, by attending to Black people's experiences across diverse geographies, by linking the past with the present, by acknowledging what has been lost, but also by centering Indigenous and Black possibility. We're inviting you to think with us and to think otherwise, to think of other forms of relationships that are relational and reciprocal, to consider the terms under which all of us might live in something close to freedom. Thank you.
Professor Davis, thank you so much. Excuse me, thank you so much. We now have time for questions. What we try to do in Scholars Hub is have as much time for questions as we do for the lecture, because it's really an amazing opportunity to have the opportunity to talk with you and learn with you. Just a reminder to the audience to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. And for those of you who are watching live on Facebook, you're welcome to submit any questions or comments through the comment section of the video, and the team will get them my way. Okay. So thank you. I wanted to just start with a question about when you spoke of the Black Canadian and Indigenous Studies programs and how, developed from, they're oppositional in terms of where they came from, but they're actually transformative, have the potential to transform York as an institution, and at the core of the institution as well as society. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how those programs have impacted York and society so far, number one. And my second part of that question is, how might Congress have that same kind of impact?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think when I did an initial scan of participants, there are actually a few students in the audience who are or were enrolled in the certificate. I can't see through the entire list, but what I so your question is kind of multifold. From I guess from a kind of theoretical and intellectual level, right? What I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do is in some ways interrupt, right? Interrupt the hierarchy of the university as and the humanities in particular as this kind of elite location of knowledge, right? So in recent years, there has been a real push, right, for this idea that universities are primarily utilitarian. And I understand, right, that for many parents, and especially, let's be honest, parents of racialized students and Black students, right? Why are you going to spend all of this money to go to university if it won't translate into a job? And so careers that show that trajectory easily and clearly, like nursing, teaching, parents get that, right? And they're like, okay. But when you want to go and study something like, like French or philosophy, then they're like, well, how does that translate, right? So there's this idea that these programs in the humanities are really, and traditionally they have, been seen as studies that the real elites can do. Like you can afford to just go to university and learn for the sake of learning, right? It's not about translating this into a job and into economic opportunities. And I'm not undermining, right, the fact that our students need to live and need to have a good quality of life, that Black people need a good quality of life. What I'm trying to interrupt, though, is that these programs don't have any direct benefit for students first, because I really care about students first, and then society after, right? When students when our students are Black and racialized and Indigenous students come to university, they're carrying with them, in many cases, years and years of trauma. High school teachers, high school guidance counselors who didn't believe in them, who didn't believe they could go on to university. Their families were saying, why are you doing this? This is a waste of time. So already their presence is an act of resistance, is an act of opposition. When those students are invited to think with Black writers, think with Black artists, think even with Black music, with expressive cultures, think with Black histories and Black philosophy, they're given this window opens up, this way of understanding themselves and the world opens up, that gives them a language to contest, to speak back against all of those voices that say, you can't do this, you don't belong here, right? This is not for you. So what I love about the certificate, we're actually moving it into a major, which is important as well. But what I like about the certificate is that students can take it alongside their major. So they can do it with psychology, they can do it with health, they can do it with sociology or criminology or social work. So they have that kind of utility part of their degree that they can give to their parents. And then they have this other thing that in many ways is for them, right? And I find that the students in the certificate do much better in their majors after coming into the program, because they come into community, they come into a sense of themselves, they meet other students who and form long-lasting relationships, and they meet faculty who care about them deeply, right? I think I saw at least one advisor in the audience, Suzette Alung, who has been absolutely amazing in terms of guiding students and helping them make those connections. But apart from what this does for the students, and when they go into the world, they have this other degree, but then they have this whole other set of knowledges. So when they're sitting at decision-making tables, whether it's in the TDSB or in a hospital, they're bringing this cultural knowledge, this historical knowledge that can say, actually, no, this is not going to work. You can't do this. You need to think this other way. And businesses need this,
Yes.
right? They actually need this, and they understand the importance of humanities majors. So I hope that fully answers your question. It took me in a lot of different directions.
No, that's helpful because I did speak at the beginning of the show about UBAN, the Black Alumni Network, which I know you were, quite involved in helping to establish. And I think that's part of, either whether it's academically, which is one critical, path, but also just the networking and even being able to connect with other professionals who are Black and are up against some of these things and in these kinds of positions where how do you challenge, how do you impact in a real way. It definitely builds on a position of strength. We have a question coming in from Facebook, a viewer on Facebook, and they ask, what are the initiatives during 2023 Congress that can help change how cultural knowledge is dissipated?
Can help change the way cultural knowledge is dissipated or
Yeah, there might have been a type, might have been maybe just distributed, shared.
oh, that's fine. Dissipated is
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, we are broadening, first of all, the audience, really trying to broaden the audience. So typically Congress is about scholars, it's about research, it's about academics who are in universities across Canada and some globally, and inviting them together. But we want to change that, right? By opening up space um, to make the audience itself more diverse. So we're bringing people into the conversation who normally would not attend an academic conference. So they're part of the research dissemination, they're finding out what's happening, but they'll also be participating in those conversations. So for example, for two of our big thinking lectures, including the one that's being delivered by the Honorable Michelle Jean, we're bringing into into those lectures 20 high school students from Downsview, Westview, Emory, and C.W. Jeffries. So the 4 high schools in Jane and Finch, along with some of their guidance counselors. And in addition, we're pairing those students with undergraduate students at York who either live in Jane and Finch or went to school in Jane and Finch in activities leading up to Congress, so that they begin to build a sense of community, but also begin to engage with each other around the themes of reckonings and reimaginings. And after both of those big thinking lectures, we have a private lunch just for those students and the speakers, so they can have a more intimate and where, engagement, and perhaps an engagement in which they'll feel more comfortable asking questions. We're also inviting high school students to submit original poetry reflecting on the theme of Congress, and we're going to invite those students into Congress to share that work. We also have a host of activities in collaboration with community partners, including, art exhibitions, creating a mural, a film project with the Fir Grove community, walks through the community, through Indigenous and Black trails in the community. So really centering community engaged research. I think that's a big shift from what has been done at Congress before, but I think it reflects also York's strengths as well as its unique location, right? We are on the northernmost outskirts of Toronto, but we're also right beside one of the most well-known, diverse, and culturally rich communities that we have not always interacted with ethically in terms of research. So part of this is also reckoning on our part, right? And I'm not saying that we're going to get it all right. Absolutely not, that everything will change. But what I hope more than anything else is that things will shift enough so that Congress can never go back to being exactly the way it was before.
Right, it won't be the last time, basically. That's the goal. Could you talk a little bit about how you and the planning, the people doing the planning around Congress, the theme, the content, the experiences, how was community involved in that decision making and planning to get it to this point?
So, um, within the formal structure of Congress, most of this thinking has taken place on the Congress Scholarly Planning Committee, which I chair. And that committee is made up of some senior leaders, but primarily faculty members and students. So it's representative of the York community, as well as with staff that are directly involved in Congress. So the manager of Congress, the director of Congress, for example. The engagement with community has happened separately. So members of the scholarly planning committee have really taken on different roles. So we have someone, for example, Joel Ong in Arts, Media, Performance, and Design, who is our community engagement lead. So he has been meeting with Byron from the TD Community Engagement Center, meeting with community artists, for example, and along with faculty, right? Other faculty, bringing together other faculty who have long-standing relationships with community and doing that work that way. We have Indigenous scholars who are on the committee doing other work, who helped us, for example, think through the logo, build the Indigenous protocol. So that each of us, right, have different outreach pieces. I am specifically responsible for the high school engagement piece, as well as some of the career corner sessions, like one we're doing on, creating a more just university. So some of that work.
Right, right, because I mean, there's so much value in that, right? Not just produce this experience, but to have the development of it be an equitable, inclusive, community-based, driven. It's just so powerful, and could be a great case study. Another question from Clifton. Clifton says, outstanding job, as always, Dr. Davis. It is
Thank you,
always such a
Catherine.
pleasure and so inspiring to hear you speak. As one of your former students and a present student of the Black Canadian Studies Certificate, I carry with me your teachings. That is, race is a social context. So my question is, what is your advice? What advice do you give students to help change the social context around race in our institutions that was founded and has the foundation from the framework of colonialism and imperialism?
Yeah. I mean, so thank you, Clifton. And I do not consider you a former student. That's the thing with students. Once you have them, you never, they stay students for life. They'll be,
Always a
some
student,
big
always
shot at
learning.
some law company, and I'll still be like, that's my student. Anyway, I think that students, but also faculty, right? Because Black and Indigenous faculty also enter universities often without role models themselves, right? So I think understanding that race is a social construct and emerges out of a social context helps us to understand that the experiences we have, the clues we receive are really about us. They're really true depictions of who we are, right? The world around us might want to deny our intelligence, might want to deny our humanity, might want to deny our possibilities. But that doesn't mean that we don't have possibilities, that we are not human, that we don't have ideas, that we are not critical to the world. So I think for me, it's knowing in fact, right, that when I sit at a table with colleagues, when I write, when I teach, I'm bringing an incredible gift to the university, not just to my students. And I know this, right? And increasingly, I know this. And so I walk with that awareness, with that knowledge, in humility, but with that knowledge. And so for me, I want my students increasingly to understand that they, each of them, are a gift to the world, a leader in their generation, that you have something to give. And it's profound and valuable and beautiful. And I always think, I believe this deeply, that for those of us who come out of histories that are violent, whether we're Indigenous or Black or identify differently, that knowledge, that suffering, that experience gives us the capacity to give, gives us the capacity to care, that doesn't come easily to other people. And so that is one of our gifts. And I would want us all to walk with that awareness.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, that is, any alumni in the audience, if you haven't been back to campus recently, like, use this as an excuse to come back, because the strength that you can draw from this is to come back as a volunteer or as any of the other options that Dr. Davis talked about. We have time for one more question, if you're good with that. Just one moment here. So we have a question from Kayla. And Kayla asks, you've spoken about faculty and students, but what do you see as the role of York staff or post-secondary staff in general in the reckoning and reimagining of the academy?
That's a good question. And thank you. Thank you for that. Staff is critically important. This is something I discovered a long time ago while I was still a graduate student. That staff carry, first of all, so much institutional knowledge. They know so much about the academy, and they're the ones who interact with students. They're the ones who care for them, who help them on a daily basis in a way that, you know, administrators can't do. And so the work that staff does is really valuable and really important. And I think it's unfortunate that we don't create enough spaces for staff to be involved. Very briefly, while I was special advisor to the dean, we had started a reading group for Black faculty in liberal arts and professional studies, and it was such a wonderful space. So, you know, my hope is that staff will be able to get time off. I think we'll speak to the managers, speak to the deans that they can be fully involved in Congress, that they can attend and also volunteer if they're, you know, if they're able, but that they can and be sit with us and be involved in these conversations. I don't think that the university can change if staff aren't brought into that vision of change as well. And that is something in some ways I think they're ahead of us because they, you know, they do that face to face work all the time. But I think we need to acknowledge and value that more and help, right? Help those staff who need a little bit of help in you know making the transition.
Yeah. And maybe this is an opportunity that we can follow up on separately. There is a Black staff network, and what might their opportunity be to sort of participate in Congress and contribute to Congress as
Oh,
well.
I didn't know there was a Black staff network, so that's good to know.
We're small, we're newish. I shouldn't say we're smaller, but we're newish. So just sort of getting going. So note to self, I'll follow up on that. Actually, one more question, because we'd love to know, hear more about your book. So can you tell us more about your recent book? I'm going to read it here. Horizon, Sea and Sound, Caribbean and African Women's Cultural Critiques of Nation.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of looking at some of the comments. Hi, Denise. And there's that really good one from Richard Douglas.
We can do that too.
Too.
I know,
Yeah,
I see that.
my next talk actually is later than I thought, actually, so I can stay a little bit. Black studies in the humanities. I mean, this is something that is important, right? Because very briefly, I talked about African American studies being formed in the 1960s and how that emerged only because of student protests. Now, 2023, and there are states in the US that are systematically outlawing these programs, right? Toni Morrison's Beloved is perhaps for me one of the most important books of fiction ever written. It cannot be taught in some public colleges in the United States, and this breaks my heart. And I said to a friend today that those of us in Canada have to do everything we can to make sure that this does not cross the border. It doesn't happen here. Funding for the humanities is hard. I think one of the ways that we get funding is through student participation, right? Unfortunately, universities are neoliberal institutions. They go where the money is. There's enrollment in the Black Canadian Studies certificate. So now we're thinking about a major. If nobody enrolled, it would die and it would go away. So I think students have to stand in solidarity continually with what we're doing, and those of us in the academy have to put pressure on funding agents, pressure on our deans, pressure on our universities to make sure that these EDI strategies and plans that they're coming up with, that they remain loyal to those goals. And then my book, Horizon, Sea, Sound, I don't know if you're able to put a link of it.
We can do that. Yep,
Yeah.
we can do that. Yep.
Came out in 2022. And it thinks with Black women's literature, expressive cultures, and art about the intersections, right? The again, it's about relational thinking, it's about reciprocity. So for me, I was really trying to think about what it means as a Black woman to live in Canada, a Black woman originally from Jamaica, to live in Canada in a way that is ethical, in a way that is just, on land that belongs to the indigenous peoples. And so that is my learning that I'm trying to do now. And I have so much more to do, but trying to think about that. I don't want my freedom to be at the expense of somebody else's freedom. And this is what this book is really all about. How can I live not just in solidarity, but in deep reciprocal relationship with other oppressed peoples in the world? And I do this thinking through Black women's fiction, through their poetry, through their art, through their film, and through their music.
Thank you for that. We put a link to your book in the chat, and we do follow up with everybody who registered for the webinar with links. So we'll share that as well. There's more questions in the chat. I would love to get the
And yes, staff can volunteer, Denise.
Yes, yes. We have the link to Congress in the chat, so staff can participate. They can also volunteer.
And I think Kayla's question is too big. I might have to come to the Black Staff Network to deal with that one.
Yeah, Black Staff, another webinar or something. I saw that question. I'd love to tackle that question, but we're out of time, Kayla. Sorry. But thank you so much for this. This has been, I'm just so grateful for you taking the time. Congress is an incredible undertaking. So taking the time to connect with our alumni community and some of the students and staff here today, we're just so appreciative. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to all the staff, students, and alumni who came today. Really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome to turn your video off now. I just have a few closing remarks for everybody. We have more events coming up throughout this month in Black History Month. But if anybody would like to share today's session with family and friends, it will be posted on our YouTube page at youtube.com/YorkU Alumni. You can also watch any of the past lectures we've had there. We do have one more poll question for you, and that's how you would rate your knowledge now after Professor Davis's talk. A window should pop up on your screen now. We'd love the feedback. Our next Scholars Hub at Home session is called Black Feminism, Critical Thinking from a Cameroonian Perspective. And that is happening, that's a partnership with Glendon College, and that's happening on February 22nd. We'll put the link in the chat to register for that Scholars Hub. Also, the Black U Alumni Network, who will again make sure is well aware of Congress and their opportunity for them to be involved, is also excited to invite you to 2 of their flagship Black History Month events. On Monday, February 13th, there will be a community screening of Black Ice, a documentary that examines the history of anti-Black racism in hockey. This is a partnership with the School of AMPD, the Black Alumni Network, and the Office of the President. The film is produced by York U alumnus Vinay Vimarni. And on Tuesday, February 28th, we're offering a financial health check with U band leader Rennie, the resource. This is a virtual event where she will explore with you whether you are being paid competitively and other relevant financial health topics. Again, registration links for these events are in the chat, and we'll also send them out after today's session. Thank you so much for joining us today, and take care. Enjoy the rest of Black History Month, and be well.